Jonathan Ayling. Jonathan, kia ora, good morning. How's your Monday started? Busy time for you guys at the Free Speech Union, I imagine?
Yes, always, I think. We would love to be out of jobs, and yet there seems to be more coming down the pike than ever before. But we're up for the challenge.
Now, there's been some interesting responses from universities in the area of academic freedom. And a question for you today: does freedom of speech also apply to name calling? Because Victoria University had quite a few ripe descriptions for you. And you see, this is the thing. Free speech is an important value, but we need to speak freely as if this person that we're talking about will one day hear the things that we said about them. That's what an Official Information Act request will do for you, right?
That's right. Well, especially when you're writing in a public institution. Certainly, having worked in a ministerial office and in Parliament, I was always very aware that the last people you want to see these things might always be the first.
Exactly.
Free speech does two things really well, and this is something I discussed in a staff op-ed that I was recently invited to write. It allows us to pursue truth, and really that's the most noble portion of what it does, isn't it? It allows us to explore in the most unexpected of places ideas that maybe do move the conversation forward. It lets everyone come to the table, and this is what a lot of people conceive of when they think of this really critical liberty. But there's a second function that it plays as well, and that's why I'm such a strong defender of it, because often we know that the speech that's being contributed isn't moving the conversation forward. It isn't helping us explore truth. It's not this noble liberty that we're conceiving of. There's still a second function to it. And the second function is that it helps us expose the idiots in our society. It helps us expose those who are bigoted, those who do hold moronic opinions. And free speech has the role of, if it won't help us identify the best arguments, at least revealing the worst arguments as well. And this is why often opponents of ours will say, well, surely if you're defending the right to speak, that must mean you agree with the person who's speaking. Not at all. No. Quite often. We're just as interested in letting the person who we don't agree with, who we think does have harmful ideas, let sunlight disinfect those ideas, expose them to wider opinion, because we trust that once people see the nonsense that they're sharing, then they will be able to decide for themselves. And so, yes, we've worked in academic freedom for quite some time, and many of your listeners will be familiar with the saga that occurred through April and May. I was invited to quite a high-profile panel discussion at Victoria University that got delayed because of scheduling issues, apparently. And we didn't buy it then, and we certainly don't buy it now that we can prove that was not the case. And somewhat predictably, as soon as our would-be censors, those who have no interest in an actual open, transparent conversation around free speech occurring, as soon as they heard that myself and one other individual who was also going to be speaking in favor of free speech were on the panel, there was bloody hell to pay, really. And what we can see now from information that has been released by Victoria University, it wasn't released on time. The request was put in so that the day the panel was rescheduled to, that we would have it that day. And I think now, gosh, I would have gone in with some good ammunition if I'd had that to hand the day we sat on the panel. But of course, they weren't going to let that happen. So then they play a few games and push it out. And eventually we got our hands on it. And it reveals really the worst hopes that we had, Andrew. Unfortunately, I suffer from excessive optimism at times, and quite often I would like to chalk up the differences that we have with our opponents as simply differences of priorities or emphasis and miscommunication. But it is also very clear that there are quite duplicitous actors out there, and unfortunately it's easier to mischaracterize your opponent and call them names than it is to mount a stronger argument. And in fact, in this 600-page document that was released, that was talking about what led up to the postponement of the panel, most of it labeling the one I liked best, I think, was a far-right zealot. And have they ever asked me my positions on any of these things? No, of course not. But what they were characterizing this is, they said, actually, free speech, it sounds really good. It's very difficult to argue against. So that's why you shouldn't go into a debate in it, because it sounds very reasonable, and it sounds credible to let these people have these voices, and it's difficult to disprove them, and so we can't let them have their say. And I go, well, if it sounds reasonable and it's difficult to disprove, have you ever considered maybe you're the ones that are, mounting very weak arguments that are easily disbanded.
There was a little bit of a backhanded compliment in there as well, and one of the comments I noted, they said, "Hey, if we have these guys in the debate, they might make fools of us like they have to other people." That's sort of a compliment in amongst the thinly veiled insults, Jonathan.
Oh, I don't think the veils were very thinly veiled at all, Andrew. It was just downright name calling, and I feel, especially for one other spokesperson, Dr. Michael Johnson, who was called in with as well, a man who has dedicated his life to rigorous study. He was the Associate Dean of Education at Victoria University, a gentleman and a scholar.
Yeah.
The way that they've treated them, this is one of the real weaknesses with censorship. I think in many ways censorship doesn't work. There's the utilitarian argument that you can make regarding that. Mm-hmm. But also, I think there's the experiential argument where, think about it, the very people that are most inclined towards advancing hate speech laws or online regulation or excluding people from university panels, they're often the most intolerant people who will reach for ad hominem attacks quicker than anyone else. Really, these are the last people we should be wanting to get to decide which opinions we hear and which beliefs we get to consider. And so I think the real hypocrisy is just blatant in this. You consider people intolerant, you consider them bigoted, and yet they admit in this correspondence, Jonathan Ayling has never expressed anything that could be considered hate speech. Yep. My grave mortal sin was simply that the Free Speech Union has stood up for the speech rights of a wide variety of people. And some of those people, they alleged, were expressing hate speech. And so, yes, we will stand up for people that we disagree with. We will stand up for their right to speak, if only to expose their bigotry. That is not the same thing as us agreeing with them. And our opponents accept. I've never entertained any ideas of that kind, and yet it's still entirely unacceptable for them to hear our opinion. I think this is a poor state for universities to be in.
It seemed like, looking behind the scenes and some of the information, now I haven't read the entire document, who has time for that? Well, you do, apparently. But the university was in a bit of a bind in that there were key lobby groups and people of influence within the university structure who were not literally, but figuratively holding a gun to their head saying, hey, if this guy's involved, we're not going to be involved. And in particular, a group that said that that your views were racist, that you were a racist, and that if you were on the panel, no Māori would want to be involved with it because of your racist views about the treaty and about Māori generally. Again, no substance to the claims.
That's right. And again, my view on those issues has never been publicly aired. Yep. No one actually knows my opinion on that because I don't talk about those issues. What I talk about is the right for everyone to come to the table and everyone to have a say, regardless of whether others disagree with them or not. And there's a real blatant, I would suggest, even racist element about this. Mm-hmm. This is completely untrue. David Seymour, who's a senior minister in cabinet, obviously the leader of the ACT Party, was invited and had accepted the invitation to also sit on this panel. It worked in the end. It didn't work out in the end simply because of a clash with cabinet, but he had accepted to sit there alongside myself and the other commentator, and he of course is Māori. Mm-hmm. So what they were saying is not that no Māori would sit on it, but the wrong kind of Māori might be willing to sit on it, the ones who don't agree with us. And so this is fundamentally simply a power. It's just about controlling the narrative of people who can then brutalize identity politics for their own purposes. And I'm sorry, I'm losing patience a lot with these interlocutors. I don't think they are operating in good faith. Don't think they do have a basis of beliefs. And we won't stand by it. And that's why the Free Speech Union has long been concerned about the role that the university is playing in growing intolerance and a desire for censorship in our society. I think we see this in other institutions as well, like the media, but it's all downstream from the university. And that's why we have long looked at options to make sure that there is more of an open conversation in our universities where a variety of perspectives can be considered. For quite some time, we were concerned that asking the state to legislate, to create law to affect this wasn't a long-term solution. Yep. Really, we needed to persuade people and draw them in line. And I still ultimately think that it's true. But there is a growing number of academics, Andrew, around the country. We've set up what's called the Inter-University Council on academic freedom. And there's a growing number of academics around the country who are deeply concerned, saying that the university is not capable of reforming itself, that they need external pressure now to come in to bear on them to stop these bullies and to stop those that are committed to a group think that silences anyone who dissents from them. And so we are working with the government now, and hopefully over some time we'll see new legislation emerge that actually helps strengthen the right to free speech in these places and of course academic freedom.
Now, we're talking about Victoria University, and this is the scene of the crime, as it were, for the debate, speech marks, that you were involved with. However, not restricted to Victoria University, and there's been a number of other issues that Free Speech Union have published which bring into question and in areas of concern about free speech at other academic institutions in New Zealand. What is the response, though? Because, hey, there'll be a bunch of people that are listening to this at the moment that they're not involved in academic institutions. That's not particularly part of their scene. However, we should all be concerned about academic freedoms, even at universities we don't go to. How can we be involved?
Well, I think that's a very fair point, Andrew. Culture really is downstream of the major institutions that we have, and that's why the Free Speech Union is working more and more to be able to advocate within these institutions, and primary amongst those are the universities. I think even if you're not university educated, or you've already gone to university and you're not planning on going back again, if you don't have kids that are going there, you are still impacted by the conversations that are happening here there. And I think it's very clear the tone of many of the really contentious conversations that we're being dominated by bullies and bigots in our university. We've got a public letter. So one thing that you can do is sign a public letter that's trying to get the government involved to consider the impact on society over the long term if universities continue this line that has very little time or place for those that they disagree with. Universities are supposed to be places where robust debate can occur. If these conversations don't happen there, where will they occur? And I think it creates universities, makes them into a place where the institutions of indoctrination, not education. Yep. And so I think joining the organization that is leading a pushback against the bigoted and the bullying is crucial. And I would also say that if you are involved in universities to an extent, if you have children there, if you are employed there, if you're studying there, speak out. Don't give in to this. The reason we've found ourselves in this position, and it's true in universities and it's true really across society and across our cultural institutions, for far too long, we haven't wanted to have a fight. We haven't wanted to be unpolite or disrespectful or contentious or disruptive. Well, it's a sorry state that we're going to find ourselves in now. Before long, where we actually lose the right to be those things. We still have the right to speak up, and it will only get harder the longer we wait. So that self-censorship, that unwillingness to actually push back against others who want to silence you, not challenge your opinions, but just stop them from being expressed, we actually need to stand up to that. And we can do that with real gentleness, we can do that with respect, but there's no reason to do it without confidence or without, a real conviction as well.
And I suppose one lesson learned by our academic institutions is, as governmentally funded organisations, they are they are impacted by human rights laws or Official Information Act laws, and accountable to, democratically elected officials in that regard. Now, I would recommend people check out the open letter, fsu.nz, if it's something which you can say yes and amen to, attach your name and details to that, fsu.nz. Jonathan, I think you're a very nice guy. I wouldn't say all those rude things about you. But hey, thank you for taking the time to chat with us on the program.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.